I believe that everyone has a story to tell. Whether it's some long, elaborate fantasy that they've written in their heads over the past 2 years, or just a funny little story about something that happened at work earlier that day. I believe that storytelling is a huge part of what makes humans different. You don't see other animals telling stories. Especially not stories about things they could never understand. And so for that reason, stories have always been something interesting to me. In any medium. I've always loved books and comics and movies, cartoons, all of that. And so naturally, my entire life I've been making stories. Whether or not they really came to fruition in a manner that most people would recognize them as stories is not really up there, but I've always been thinking stories at the very least. About a year ago, I started drawing these little robots. Actually, what happened was I was sitting at school by myself in the cafeteria. It was really early before school because my brother had to get there early, so I just kind of went with him. And I was sitting in the cafeteria drawing. I was just doodling this little robot, kind of similar to Gurr from Invader Zim, one of my favorite cartoons. And my friend Alice walks up to me. Alice is, she's just this crazy, crazy good artist. Like, better than I could ever even imagine being. My friend Alice walks up to me and she says, "That looks terrible." And so I look back down at it. It's very, very plain. It's just some basic shapes made to suggest that it's a robot. And, for once in my life, I didn't take that personally. I just said to myself, she's right. You can do better. And so this actually inspired a very long chain of procrastination. This is probably about when I stopped doing very well in school. That was about my sophomore year. But I spent the first 3 class periods of that day redoing the drawing on a full sheet of paper, fully shaded, just super detailed. And at the end of the school day, we had play rehearsal together. So I brought it up to her first thing, and I said, "Is that good enough for you?" And she's like, "Wow, where did that come from?" I was like, "So this one's not terrible, huh?" And she replies, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "Well, this morning you said my robot looked terrible." And she was like, "I said your robot looked adorable." And so that's how a misunderstanding got me into drawing. I'm still not very good at drawing, and I don't draw too often, but drawing was a huge part of what brought me closer to the storytelling that I am working with today. After that, I spent the next couple, probably 8 to 10 months writing a story about robots, because that's all I could draw. And it was an alright story. As I kept writing it, it just got more and more complex and more just muddled, and so I tossed that one and started over. I was actually going through an art block at one point, and I was like, well, I can't seem to draw any robots. And so I took the other thing that I could draw. I was all right with fabric. And so I started drawing these little ragdoll creatures, and that turned into a whole nother story, which I also trashed. So that was 2 stories that I had spent a lot of time on, and they just never really became anything, just because, I don't know, I just kind of gave up on them. But then one day while I was at work, I came up with this one story, and I'm not going to go into too much detail because it's actually the story that I am still working on and that is still being made. I have a cast, I've voice cast, I've got an art team, and we're going to be making a beautiful little motion comic audio drama, somewhere in between there. I'm not sure how much motion there will actually be, but there will be art and there will be audio, and I'm super excited for it, super hyped for that. But anyways, the reason I'm making this podcast, I don't know. This is going to be a lot more. I was going to say it's going to be more laid back than Sonar, but that's not saying a lot, because Sonar. Well, maybe that is saying a lot, because Sonar's super laid back already. But this is just going to be a little thing I'm going to make every once in a while, just when I feel like it. Just because I really like to talk about stories, and I feel like I feel like stories might be a little bit too off subject for Sonar to speak about on a regular basis. So this is my story corner. I was going to call it the story corner, but I figured that might be a little bit too much. You know, stories are kind of like snowflakes. Everybody says that everyone is unique and different, and really when you look closely at them, they all kind of look the same. I mean, especially if you just get a whole bunch of them together, it's just you can't really tell where one starts and one begins. They're all pretty much the same, except for some really intricate differences. I mean, take this premise: a young boy who lives with his uncle, and then tragedy occurs, and he leaves them to go become a hero. That's Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, Star Wars. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of other stuff. Oh, Spider-Man. See, I didn't even. Also, stories are all very similar. We all tell the same basic stories. I mean, if you take just about any story, you can probably sum up the plot saying it's just like this story with this story and this story. Stories aren't that different. So what makes a story important? What makes your individual story important? This was something that I had to wrestle with when I was writing my story, because a lot of times, I don't know, it gets really depressing writing a story, because you're like, why am I putting so much effort into this? I'm not getting paid to make this story. I'm not getting anything out of it other than the satisfaction of making this story. So what am I doing? Well, first of all, that's all you really need. You should make it just for the satisfaction of it, because I don't know, I think it's an important thing. If you love making stories, do it. It shouldn't matter whether or not you're making money. That's what I'm doing, because I'm flipping burgers at the Wendy's, but that's just to get money. I don't really care that much about money. I just, it kind of helps sometimes. But you should do what you love because you love it. It shouldn't matter. Because I mean, what's your life really come down to? If all you do is make money, it's really it's almost more depressing than writing a story that only you care about, when you really think about it. But anyways, I was actually reading something, and it was like, write your story for that one person who will enjoy it. And I was thinking, well, why is one person going to enjoy my story if my story, has so many cliches and is so like other stories? Well, one thing you can do is remove all the cliches and make a story that, from your perspective, is entirely unique. And if you do that and have literally nothing in your story that is similar to any other story that's ever been crafted, chances are it's not going to be very good. I don't know. You can try and prove me wrong, but if you made a story that was entirely original and was nothing like any story that had ever been told, I think that your story would hardly be recognizable as a story. And the things that humans use to recognize a story are actually, it's very intriguing to me, the way we understand plot. Like, even just subconsciously, some people aren't even aware of the things present in stories that make them feel certain ways. It's I don't know, it almost bothers me that some people don't look further into those kinds of things, like imagery. And I mean, there's so much of it in everything, even in cartoons. But anyways, I'm getting sidetracked here. Where was I? I think what makes people love individual stories, what makes a story unique, isn't the majority of the story. The majority of the story is going to contain things that other stories contain. It's kind of like a person. People are made up of the same parts as every other person, and that's you're still a unique human being, regardless of the fact that you are made up of all these similar parts. Like everybody, well, I can't say everybody. I feel bad now. Why did I think that? People generally have hands. People generally have a nose. People generally have eyes. People generally have mouths. People generally have the parts that make humans function. People generally have a heart and lungs. Some people are missing some of these parts, but the majority of people have the majority of these parts that make you recognizable as a human. And yet, people are unique. And so I think that stories are the same way. It's the little intricacies of a story that make your story unique, or that make any story unique. It's the little bits of character that are there, the little quirks and funninesses, and the little things, the little phrases that no one else would say, the little descriptions that just kind of work differently, the little problems in someone's art style that don't make it quite perfectly, realistic, but still give it that character that is just reminiscent of themselves. I think that in order to make a story unique, you need to put a piece of yourself into it. I think that you need to lend a story a piece of yourself because you're unique. And so, logically, if you give a story a piece of yourself, that would make your story unique. Just like, life. If every living thing is in some manner unique, but yet every living thing needs a piece of another living thing in order to exist. Life only comes from life, and so uniquity only comes from uniquity. At least this is what I think. I don't know. This is all my thoughts on stories. I guess you could probably, disprove me, and that won't make a difference. This is just my thoughts. I'm super sick right now, so this is really hard for me. But I don't know. I feel like I'm enjoying talking about this. I hope you're enjoying listening. If you're still listening, it probably means you're enjoying this to some degree. And so, it's kind of like a good story kind of ends up being like a quilt. A quilt in and of itself is its own unique thing, but it's full of holes. W-H-O-L-E-S. Holes. It's full of pieces of other things. It's full of other fabrics. It's full of pieces of other things. It's kind of like a collage. And so that's why no story is truly unique. No good story, rather. I guess, as I said earlier, you could probably make a story that was entirely unique, but I don't think it would be very recognizable as a story. But then again, what do I know? I'm just a crazy kid, adult man trying to make his way in this crazy world, just trying to tell a story. So don't be afraid to put a little bit of yourself in your story. I think the truly great stories have a piece of the writer's soul in it. And my story isn't entirely mine. I could never take full credit for my entire story because I have so many friends who are helping me look over it and try and flesh it out and make it better. And any idea that happens is just up for game. It's free game. And so, although the story's not entirely mine, it's rooted in me. And I think that's what makes a story good. It's the passion, it's the soul behind it that makes it great. Not even necessarily good characters. Good characters are a part of a good story, but you can probably have a good story with no real standout characters. I mean, it'd be hard, but good characters alone do not make a good story. Good plot doesn't necessarily make a good story. And I mean, I guess then we have to ask ourselves, what is a good story? What is a good story? When do you know a story is good? Because popular stories aren't all agreeably good stories. I mean, the Twilight series was super popular, and I think a lot of people would also agree that it's not a very good story. At the same time, Star Wars is super popular. The original trilogy, I mean, if you really think about it, the plot's not great. I'm probably going to get all kinds of hate for this, but the plot is pretty linear. It's very basic. It's just the basic hero's journey plot. I mean, it's got the father plot twist that's so iconic, but I mean, other than that, for the most part, it's a fairly basic plot. And in fact, there are lots of plot holes, and people for the entire time it has existed have been pointing out plot holes. I don't think that plot holes necessarily detract from the greatness of a story. I mean, they can, but I don't think that you should let a plot hole ruin a story for you. If you're reading a story, if you're enjoying intaking a story, if you are devouring a story, if you are the consumer of a story, when you look for plot holes, that doesn't help you enjoy the story. And if you see plot holes, I don't know, me personally, I try and just kind of breeze past them. I mean, there are times when there are plot holes that just bug me, and I can't focus on the story after that. But it's so much more fun to just be able to enjoy a story, regardless of its issues. It's like people. It's so much better to just be friends with someone, regardless of the fact that maybe they're kind of messed up. Because everyone's kind of messed up, you know? I don't know. What do I know? Well, I think that just about concludes this. I don't know how much longer I can talk about this without just getting further off track than what I already am. I don't know if I'll even upload this, because I'm not sure how good it is. But thank you for listening, if you are listening. And, maybe I'll do some more of this. Maybe I'll talk about stories. Maybe we'll actually cover some topics. I don't know. This is going to be super off the cuff, super just train it, whatever stream of consciousness I have. I'm just gonna kind of turn on my mic and I'm gonna talk about it. That's what's gonna happen. If that's not what you want, then you don't have to listen. But thank you for listening, and I hope you have a pleasant day.